Considered by many to be the greatest of all modern philosophers, Immanuel Kant was born in Prussia in 1724, where he lived a quiet and studious life for all of his 80 years, a man of such regular habits that people used to set their clocks by him as he took his daily stroll. While Kant made a name for himself with his early essays on geography and science, it was his work on ethical philosophy that launched his ideas onto the world stage. In his writings, Kant aimed to establish a supreme principle of morality that could be applied universally to everyone at all times, irrespective of culture or circumstance, a principle he named the Categorical Imperative.
So act that your principle or maxim might safely be made a law for the whole world. Always recognize that individuals are ends, and do not use them as means to your end. So act through your principle as a law-making member of a kingdom of ends.
As a deontologist, Kant believed that the highest form of good is goodwill, and to have a goodwill is to do one's duty. Duty mattered to Kant, not consequences, and he taught that right actions are intrinsically right if the maxim or rule of that action can be applied by all people in all circumstances and at all times. A moral community where everyone treats each other as ends in themselves. As ends in ourselves, all of us, says Kant, have an intrinsic dignity and a value beyond price, and as beings capable of reason, each one of us deserves respect and must not be treated as objects or things. Kant taught that unlike creatures in the animal kingdom, who are slaves to the powerful instinctive urges that engulf them, human beings endowed with the gift of reason have the intellectual capacity to seek freedom from these powerful and seemingly irrational impulses. The prime suspect and the chief disturber of reason, says Kant, is lust, which, when dominant, dishonours us, because it dishonours our reason, and by desiring only another person's sex rather than the whole totality of that person, we violate their dignity as a fellow member of a kingdom of ends. According to Kant, any action that undermines our status as reasonable beings is suspect, and an action bereft of reason is demeaning because it brings us down to the level of non-reasoning animals.
Sex exposes mankind to the danger of equality with the beasts. Taken by itself, it is a degradation of human nature by placing it on a level with animal nature.
If we succumb to these instincts, then, according to Kant, we degrade and demean our status as rational agents.
By virtue of the nature of sexual desire, a person who sexually desires another person objectifies that other person, both before and during sexual activity, and makes of the loved person an object of appetite. As soon as that appetite has been stilled, the person is cast aside as one casts aside a lemon which has been sucked dry.
Yet, like all our instinctive functions, sex has its own peculiarities and yearnings. And in emotionally and hormonally charged environments, the mysterious and often misunderstood impulses that dictate sexual expression can sometimes overwhelm reason. Kant argued that we should not be sidetracked by feeling and inclination, and the fact that we ought to do something implies that it is possible to do it. To act morally is to do one's duty, and one's duty is to obey the moral law which we can know through reason. According to Kant, the most virtuous expression of sexuality is to be found within marriage. While a couple are still placed on the level of non-rational creatures, for a temporary time when having sex, it is permissible because it is done in the broader context of two people freely engaging in a cooperative, lifelong, contractual venture. They are not using each other merely as a means to an end, but are doing so in a broader situation of overall respect. The purpose of marriage is not, as natural law theory would have it, procreation. The purpose of marriage is to allow the union of two persons of different sexes to have lifelong reciprocal possession of their sexual faculties. Husband and wife are on equal footing in this regard, and sexual enjoyment is a right to be expected within the partnership till death do they part. Although Kant's philosophy is still hugely influential today, it is not without its critics, particularly Kant's idea of universalizability. The problem for Kantian ethics is that every situation has its own uniqueness and its own peculiarities, and as no moral dilemma is exactly the same, it seems unreasonable to have them all governed by the same universal rule or maxim. Certainly no two sexual relationships are exactly the same, and to expect them all to be similarly governed seems far too limiting. Kant's refusal too in allowing exceptions to rules places severe restrictions on behaviour. In life, duties sometimes conflict, and people can find themselves in situations where they have no choice but to abandon one principle for the sake of another. Other critics argue that Kant is much too optimistic about human moral autonomy and puts too much weight on human judgment. By shifting moral responsibility to the individual and by severing any relationship with an external authority, Kant envisages humans as the supreme authors of moral laws. However, the danger is that as the sole creators of moral rules, humans could make whatever laws they like, and this could result in the breakdown of any sense of an universally accepted moral code.